Hi, this is Bob Murphy, and you're listening to the Libertarian Christian Podcast.
Welcome to the show that gets Christians thinking about faith and politics. Get ready to challenge the status quo, expand your imagination, and tackle controversy head on. Let's stand together at the intersection of faith and freedom. It's time for the Libertarian Christian Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Libertarian Christian Podcast. I'm Norman Horn, president of the Libertarian Christian Institute. Today, I am joined by Doug Stewart and Nick Gausling for a roundtable discussion about, well, a number of things that have been on our minds lately. So you can think of this episode as if we're all just hanging out together, having drinks, and we just totally have to talk about liberty and what's been on our minds lately. We've got a number of things that we're interested in discussing today. So, Nick, what have you been thinking about lately?
You know, one of the things that's been in the news quite a bit lately, and it's sort of a recurring story. I mean, there's always new elements of it that we're seeing, new developments, but it's the issue of artificial intelligence and robotics and what's going on in really the state of technological innovation. Now, you know, being libertarians, obviously we are supportive of the concept of innovation, especially being Austrians anyway. It's good to have developments that take old things that are less efficient and obsolete and pave way for things that are more efficient, that make our lives easier, that lift people out of poverty. And there's just so many exciting things for civilization that can come out of that. But there's also a flip side to it that I think we have to beware of. And sometimes this is discussed in these news stories and reports on these things, but not as much as I think really needs to be. And that has to do with what are the downsides of what can happen with AI and roboticizing and automating everything. And particularly what I mean by that is the ethics of delegating ethical decisions and the well-being of humans to artificial intelligence and robots and things of that sort. So just today, for example, I mean, by the time this posts, it'll be a few weeks out, but I was reading today that Jack Ma, who's the CEO of Alibaba, one of the largest distributor retailers in the world, it's kind of a competitor to Amazon, a little different, but similar, based out of China. And he said that eventually even CEOs will be replaced by robots and AI, which may well be a good thing. But the thing that I think often goes unconsidered in this is what happens when AI starts replacing judges and courts and police and all these really state entities and others who have sort of life or death authority in society, because that seems to be the trajectory that things are taking. And I guess the question is, can we outsource ethics, and particularly Christian ethics, into artificial intelligence? And my inclination would be to say no, you can't do that. It's not metaphysically possible to do that because a machine can't be indwelt by the Holy Spirit. A machine doesn't have the ability to interpret and apply Christian ethics because that's the power of God working through his church to do that. So what is society going to look like if we take the ethics out of it? And of course, I mean, we're living in a post-Christian culture. So what's going to happen when we have people who are programming AI and robots and other things of this sort to render ethical decisions? And I mean, and then the really scary thing is if it gets to the point of singularity where these machines become self-aware and then just start replicating to where it's out of control. Now, I don't want to seem like I'm talking about doomsday here, because I mean, obviously being Christian, we believe that, you know, God is in control. Christ is sovereign, and ultimately he's going to inaugurate his kingdom. But that doesn't mean that bad things can't happen in the meantime. So, Norman, you're a scientist. In your experience, what is generally kind of the climate these days when it comes to science and engineering and thinking about the ethics of innovation, and what kind of impact will that have on society?
Well, I think the impending ethical decisions that are probably particularly relevant in the upcoming improvements and deployments of AI are probably going to be most felt in things like self-driving cars. And those are where you see some really interesting kind of discussions going on about, ethical decision making by AIs. There, to a certain extent, we've already been dealing with this for some time by virtue of just airline travel. I mean, for the most part, even a lot of airplanes at this point are for the most part done by autopilot. Even landings to a large extent are being controlled by algorithms, and that's what AIs are. I mean, the thing that everybody kind of has to remember here is that when we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, well, it's only as intelligent as it's programmed to be. We have no precedent for it, and I don't believe in the singularity that people seem to get all hyped up about. But there's just no precedent for emergent intelligence in such a way that humans are intelligent. We don't see beating the Turing test for, in any significant way that allows for a computer to pass as a human. And until we even get close to that, you can't even imagine having particular ethical decisions that are any more than algorithmically produced results. And so really, when we start having those ethical discussions, it's, well, what are the ethics that we are going to build into it? And what types of calculations are we going to force the programs to make decisions? So it's not like that you can put agency upon these things any more than the agency of a computer program that is playing a video game with you or something to that effect. That's just running through algorithms. So the question, is a lot of it is, well, how do humans make ethical decisions? How do we turn that into an algorithm for, say, an automated car or something to that effect? I think that's a really interesting question. This is why Google and other companies that are building automated cars, self-driving cars, are bringing in ethicists and philosophers to think about these things with their engineering teams. That's pretty interesting just from the outset. I don't really have any fear per se of some type of emergent intelligence like some people seem to. There's nothing to that. I believe, at least. I'm not sure that there's, if we start thinking about what happens when AIs might be put into positions of, we might call it state authority in some way. I mean, are we looking at an iRobot situation with a robot police officer or something like that? I mean, right now, I think the more pertinent ethical decisions are those that are being made at the forefront of deployed technology, and we've already got some precedent set up, but we're working through that. And the more that we work through it, the more we'll be able to anticipate potential drawbacks, issues, and hopefully realize if and when it should not be deployed. As in the case of, say, a judge or a police officer style or something to that effect. I think that the biggest things that are up on the horizon are probably self-driving cars.
One of the things that comes to mind here is, I don't know if this is going to be one of those problems that is going to just be right upon us and we're going to be caught off guard. I mean, maybe that's true, but with Norm, you mentioned ethicists are being brought in by Google and Tesla and whoever else is making or doing research on self-driving cars. They're doing that because they know that this is a potential issue. I mean, people are talking about it. The people who are in the know, the ones who are on the bleeding cutting edge of this evolution, they know the potential problems that could happen. One thing that's a little bit more imminent is who's legally responsible for the decisions that are made by AI. Is Tesla responsible if your car slams on the brakes and your toddler's injured? Like there's a whole number of questions that deal with, insurance. There are insurance issues. There are, liability issues. If you're in self-drive mode on a Tesla, those kinds of questions are a little bit more imminent in terms of, like where do the legalities show up?
Is that like a confusion though of liabilities? I mean, because to a certain extent, like here's the problem I have with like saying, for instance, okay, well, if a self-driving car makes a mistake like that, or if it doesn't, at what point is it the algorithm's fault versus something else, like the fact that maybe your brakes weren't 100%, or there was occlusion in the visible field or something like that, and like these things you can't solve all these problems. You can't necessarily assign agency to these things. We like, even if these are ethical decisions that or ethical conundrums in a sense, well, we've been operating with these sorts of problems for a long time now. Even what happens when, for instance, like what happens in manufacturing situations when a robot does something wrong, or what happens when a manufacturing situation where some sensor goes off and something explodes. And I mean, we have ways of already accounting for these things, and I think that those are already there's precedents that are set forth in those
Pilot
that are going
versus
to
autopilot.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think what the larger point, I guess maybe that was a specific way of bringing up a larger point, is that there are problems that are on the horizon and there are problems that are within our arm's reach. And these are the problems that are within our arm's reach. We're dealing with them. They might be new manifestations or iterations of, liability problems or, intelligence concerns regarding. The thing is about the cars, no, they don't have agency, but they're designed, at least that's the way I understand it, they are designed to operate as if they did. And when they are designed to operate as if they did have agency as a replacement for a human driver so that the human driver can multitask and not have to drive, okay, I think that's where anybody would aim, is the perfection of that sort of experience, then you have owners of these cars giving up their agency by saying, okay, car, take me to work. Well, at that point, at what mode of car, there's all those kind of complicated questions. Is it in completely self-driving mode? What responsibility legally does the driver have? Is it going to be they cannot text while watching their car drive? Those are, it's kind of strange because like texting while driving might become legal again in many states if your car is a self-driving car and if it's on a major highway. There's all these. So the point I'm trying to make is some things are within arm's reach. We're dealing with them. I don't feel as worried about this problem the way Norman doesn't feel worried about this problem. One of the reasons I don't feel worried is I think we're going to have enough time to figure it out. I don't think this is going to be this cataclysmic meteor that's coming and we only have a few weeks to figure it out.
I mean, they come up with these crazy situations like, well, what if this were to occur? And, I mean, look, let's posit that somebody. So suppose that the car sees Hitler in front of it. Does it, because Hitler time traveled, is it or should we run over Hitler or something? Do we need to have that algorithm plugged in too? So what if it's like Kim Jong-un? He's living now. I mean, should the self-driving car be programmed with something to run him over for the good of mankind or something? Like, we can come up with all sorts of crazy scenarios, but it's only going to be as good as the algorithms that we program into it. And we're already figuring that out. And, to a certain extent, Doug, you say like we know what the problems are. Actually, I think there's a certain extent which we don't know what certain problems are and that are going to come up. I mean, that's why people have been hired to come and figure it out. It's because we don't know. This is an entrepreneurial endeavor at this point. We don't have all the answers. But you can't plan for everything. You can only assign certain types of risk. I kid you not, we were my boss and I were driving to the airport probably a few weeks ago. We were going to fly to Connecticut for a business trip, and on the way to Fort Lauderdale, we encountered 2 iguanas on the road, and they got run over in front of us. 2 iguanas on the road just got run. Like, you can't program that in. You can't anticipate every little thing happening. You can only assign risks and insure against problems. And so that's the way that this will be approached as well. Is that we can't plan right now for every possible scenario as a driver now. And so what do? We insure against it. We insure against catastrophic things. And that's what's going to happen too with automated cars.
To kind of close out this discussion, I agree with basically what you guys are saying in that regard, as far as the technologies that are imminent and are being developed and worked on right now. Insurance companies, particularly in the property and casualty side of the insurance business, have extensive actuarial teams that are the greatest statisticians on earth who are working out how to handle these things from a legal tort kind of perspective. Tort law refers to personal injury and property and things of that sort. So I totally get that. Maybe I'm just thinking a little bit further down the road, maybe past our lifetimes. I don't know how quickly it's going to come about. But just based on what people who are the leading innovators and CEOs and inventors in this space are saying, I think it's something to be considering now, so that when we get to that point, whether it's us or 3 or 4 generations from now, the ethical discussions about these matters haven't been just sort of pushed to the wayside. So it's good that there's this discussion on this regard happening now.
I think that's a fair point, that there are issues that, down the line we'll be discussing these still, when as the technology progresses. So I think that's good. Yeah.
Another story that has been dominating the news cycles lately has to do with Russia and these accusations that Trump and many of his top advisors, and now all these different individuals in the alternative press, be they more on the conservative side or more on the libertarian side, everybody's allegedly in the pocket of Russia. Everybody's a Putin puppet. Everybody's being controlled by the Kremlin. That's the narrative that is being pushed out by a lot of mainstream press, and particularly the left mainstream press. And, just the other day, there's this woman, Louise Mensch, who was a British politician who for some reason has now gained a lot of traction with the left and the never Trump conservatives here in the United States. But so she's one of the people who's really propounding this concept, this idea that everything is a Russian conspiracy. And just the other day, she made the claim that she was in possession of a list of 205 people who, or 210, I believe. She said, her number was 210. So I'm in possession of a list of 210 people who are dupes of the Kremlin. These are agents of Putin. And on there were individuals from the Ron Paul movement, the Libertarian movement, the alt-right, all these individuals who just basically were not going along with this narrative, or who were even marginally skeptical of neoconservatism and mainline neoliberalism and all these sorts of things, wound up on this list. And I'm watching this. For anyone who knows a little bit about American history in the 1950s, it was almost a verbatim replay of Joe McCarthy going into his famous speech and saying, I'm in possession of a list of 205 State Department officials who are undercover communists. And so now here we are in 2017, Louise Mensch is going on and saying, I'm in possession of a list of 210 people who are agents of Putin. And it's like we're replaying the Cold War. And I mean, like, you couldn't even script this. I was flabbergasted when I saw this happen, but people are actually buying it. And, the interesting thing, I was just the other day, I was watching a replay or a rerun rather of an episode of The Big Bang Theory from like 5 years ago. And they were talking about the Russians, and it was all very derogatory. Like, they're making fun of, look at how backwards Russia is. And now, 2016, 2017, it's like Russia is this grand superpower that controls everything from behind the scenes, like a chess game. And so when we consider the power of narrative, I mean, it's just amazing how public perception can change on this. And I shouldn't be surprised. Knowing what I know about history and society and how people react en masse to things, like, it shouldn't surprise me that many people are falling for this anti-Russia line, but they are. And the danger is, it's not just like, some people don't like the Russians and blah, blah, blah. They're pushing towards war. We're talking about a 2017 nuclear superpower versus nuclear superpower in World War III type scenario. Like, that's the danger if it gets escalated to the extreme. And so I think it's incumbent on us to denounce the propaganda and strive for peace, which, as Christians, we should be doing that anyway. But, this is just one of the most pressing things in the world right now, is this crazy push towards World War III.
And it's particularly weird considering that, we just also had an incident which we as libertarians should also denounce, where we did yet another foreign interventionism of bombing Syria. And in fact, as I understand, American ambassadors were sent to the UN to basically say, we need to tell Russia to back down with respect to Syria, as if, like, for some reason, we're in Putin's pocket, but this just happened. So how does that fit the narrative? Well, they come up. It's just amazing how people will kind of figure out some new theory to explain it all, and it's just crazy that how these conspiracy theories are constructed in order to cast blame where they want to, and because they're so dissatisfied, and because they're not getting what they want. And that actually goes back to, ironically enough, Rene Girard again. We've talked about Rene Girard plenty already in this podcast, and the fact is that the state of the left is that they were so confident and so just with pure faith that they were going to get what they wanted in the past 6 months or so. And they didn't. And now they're trying to come up with as many ways as possible to explain how this could possibly have occurred to them, and how they lost the presidency, how they are losing their hold on popular opinion in certain ways, and they're scapegoating as many things and as many people, as many others as they possibly can, in order to try and explain what they're doing. And try and get back to where they are getting what they want again. And this is just straight out of mimetic theory playbook, in a sense, that the scandals are mounting. They are not getting what they want, and they don't understand why that is. So they cast blame. They scapegoat some type of authority figure, and say, this is why we can't get what we want. And as a result, they want to try and take them down. And they try to invent new ways. They create witches. They create demons out of it. And they say, well, this is it. This is the reason. And it's really crazy, but it's also, it's very characteristic of what happens in this type of situation. And as Nick, you said, it's incumbent upon us to speak some truth to the matter, and that's exactly what we got to do, because we should be able, as Christians, to see through this. we should see through the veil of victimization like this, and we should see through the veil of power plays, and we should speak truth into both power and into people's lives, because they're going crazy over it. They're becoming just loonies to a certain extent because they can't figure it out. They're trying to explain their reality in some way, and they can't. But with the truth of the gospel, with the truth of understanding, why it is that we behave the way that we do, and that's what the Bible tells us so very well. Just read James, and you kill and covet because you can't get what you want. That's what we do, and without the gospel in our lives, we'll continue to do that. So we got to keep speaking that truth to people, and we got to say, like, the boogeyman in your backyard that you believe is because of Russia. Look, it doesn't exist. You don't have that. I think that the left is really losing it over this, and it's not as if that the answer is, well, we just need to get the right back in power or something. Like, no, we can speak truth to power in that too. The right has their own set of boogeymens. They have their own things. I mean, look, like, just imagine they keep having imagined enemies too in North Korea, and they want to scapegoat China for problems. They want to scapegoat the Middle East for yet more things. And look, we need to back off. The message of liberty and the message of the gospel are one and the same in this respect, and that we have to back off. We need to interact peaceably with one another in order to create a better world. Like that's the truth of the matter.
Those are some really fantastic points. Like you said, on the right, there's been scapegoating for years. I mean, it's really just the essence of humans to scapegoat. But for years under right-wing rule, we're told that there's terrorists under every rock and behind every tree. And now it's even though there's the right is in power again, but now we have the left saying, oh, there's Russians everywhere, and it's like it never ends. There's always a new enemy. There's always someone else to blame. And that's not to say that there aren't actual terrorists. Of course there are. And that's not to say that the Russian government is good. Of course it isn't. But it is to say that we have to have some sensibility in thinking about what the real threats are and not allow ourselves to be drummed up into a frenzy over war propaganda, because that's when rationality goes out the window and bad decisions that end up costing a lot of lives are foolishly made. But one of the things that I will say that's really interesting about Russia is how much it has changed in the past 100 years. I mean, when you think back to we're about 100 years out approximately from the Russian Revolution, the Leninists coming in, the Bolshevik Party taking over, killing Tsar Romanov and his family, and institutionalizing the USSR. So now, if you look at Russia, which just a few decades ago was officially an atheist country, the church there is really starting to thrive again. And the culture is being rebuilt. And one of the interesting stories that actually just came up pretty recently here in this most recent news cycle is a well-known evangelical commentator, Hank Hanegraaff, also known as the Bible Answer Man, converted to Orthodoxy. And Orthodoxy is also the dominant religion now in formerly atheistic Russia, which I just kind of find that fascinating. So, Norman, for those of our listeners who hadn't heard about what was going on with Hanegraaff recently, why don't you jump in and give us the background?
Sure. Yeah. Hank Hanegraaff is an interesting fellow. As you said, he's been known for years as the Bible Answer Man. I didn't actually know about him until I graduated high school, which, come to think of it, is now about half a lifetime ago. It's getting there. in 2001, and I was given a book by Hank Hanegraaff Thought it was interesting. I listened to a few of his radio shows at that point as well, and found it interesting. And I haven't paid a ton of attention to him, but I've held a generous respect for a man who's made part of his life's work, being acquainted with the Bible and willing to go out and do apologetics and talk about Scripture to people and encourage fellow believers. And so when a guy like that decides he's going to switch denominations, people take notice. And in fact, this has been kind of a point of controversy to a number of people. And if you can find some interesting, we'll just call it that, articles written at places like Pulpit and Pen, and I'm sure that you can find plenty of others, many of whom are very critical of this. And it kind of reminded me, how important it is to really have a good understanding of Christian tolerance. Not tolerance in the sense that we sometimes hear about it, where anything and everything is okay, moral relativism in a sense, but properly understood Christian tolerance, where we don't make it our life's work to just excoriate other people who claim the label of Christian but believe somewhat differently than we do. Personally, and from the denomination that we might attend, but rather seek to understand and to really to come together with a more a seeking objective, that we want to seek to understand Jesus better, to seek to understand the church as a whole, the universal church better, and to understand our fellow believers so that we can love them and encourage them better as a result, rather than trying to tear each other down. It's really quite remarkable how people have wanted to just rip apart like the people at Pulpit and Pen. I'm not afraid to say they really just tried to rip apart Hank and the Greek Orthodox Church, and it's just wrong. That's just wrong. We do not need to behave like that to each other. There have been points in time. The Reformers had a place. There was a reason why we had the Protestant Revolution. That's fine, and we can admit that those sorts of things. But this is not the same situation. We don't need to be acting like that against each other. Instead, I think it's more incumbent upon us to really really seek to understand. I'm reminded of one of the first get-togethers, meetups that we had as a Christian Libertarian group in Austin a few years ago, right after we had the first Christians for Liberty conference. And of course, kind of in the Christians for Liberty conferences, the bulk of the people who've come have been from Texas, and probably if there's any predominant region of Texas, it would be Austin, because it was there. And so we had these separate meetups where we invited whoever wanted to come, and we were just going to have a discussion group. And in our first meeting, we had nearly 20 people there and about 10 different denominations. And you know what? It was great. We had Catholics, we had some people from the Orthodox Church, we had Anglicans, me, the Church of Christ kid, we had Lutherans, Baptists, people who claimed non-denominational. You name it. We had, like I said, I think we had about 10 different denominations there. And what I find exciting about those situations is that we can have a real exercise in true Christian tolerance. There's nothing wrong with having an argument. There's nothing wrong with getting even a little heated. But I would love at any given point when those sorts of things happen, I want to exit that conversation, and we almost want to give each other high fives, like, man, that was great. I learned something from you. I am glad that we were able to have a great conversation as Christian brothers. I know that we differ, but I now am encouraged. I am ready to learn more. You have made it possible for me to understand Jesus a little better. I want that to be the mantra of ecumenism, as opposed to just let everything fly. None of it matters really in the end. It's all just or the opposite of that, which is we just need to tear each other apart. We need to drive each other away. We need to make sure we set up our own fiefdoms and circle the wagons and make sure that there is never a question that is brought up that might cause me to think a little differently. And we as libertarians ought to kind of get that too. And that's part of the reason I think why it was so easy for us, even in our little meetup group, to be that type of group, because we're used to being ostracized already, because we don't get what we want as libertarians, right? I mean, we never do in politics, pretty much. It doesn't happen. That's unheard of. So we're used to kind of being the outcasts already. Why would we want to drive each other away at the point of words like that? Instead, we come together, we argue in a good sense, we have good discussions as a result, and we walk away having really been encouraged by that. And that's one of the greatest things I encountered even in our small groups like that. And I hope that you get those opportunities too, dear listeners, and to my two co-hosts here, is that the opportunity that we have in places like our Facebook group, our Facebook page, the interactions that we have via our conferences, the events that we hold, and through other libertarian groups where we get together and we meet fellow Christians that we didn't know existed. That's a great opportunity. You should take those and try and put yourself in those situations sometime where you will be open to learn. And then you won't have these situations where somebody decides that they feel convicted to go to a different denomination or something, and you won't feel the need to tear them apart. Instead, you'll look to understand. That's hopefully my message to our good Christian brothers and sisters here and our listeners today.
I think that's an encouraging way to put things, because that my heart is for conversation instead of, winning debates, with people. Libertarians, we're a rowdy crowd when it comes to matters of opinion. We have we have a really good Facebook group going that has a lot of really interesting debate and a lot of, it's just a lot of hearty debate and sometimes not so hearty debate, because, people
and a lot of humor.
Yes, a lot of humor. I think it's well moderated in several ways.
Well, Doug, let's just invite people now to come and join it.
Yeah, maybe we should.
If you're on Facebook, you should come and join our Christian Libertarian Facebook group. In fact, if you just search, in the search bar for Christian Libertarian Facebook group, it'll come up. It's got about 9,000 members in it, give or take a few hundred. Well, at least at this point in time, which is May 2017, it's probably going to be 1,000 more by the time this comes out.
So here's what you can expect. You can expect hearty debate. You can expect people to encourage each other. You can expect to be floored by, oh my goodness, I can't believe that person actually posted that. How could they believe that? Sort of experiences.
You'll get challenged.
You can see things and be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe someone else wrote an article that articulated what I'm feeling, and that just really resonated with me, and I'm going to share this. And so there's an eclectic variety of things that we are going to talk about. I mean, we've recently debated the AP style for using singular they and whether or not it's an influence of cultural Marxism. That's a pretty random thing if you think about it. And then, of course, we talk about Romans 13 and we talk about all kinds of things. So join the group and participate. Don't just join the group and browse through. We love participation. The more participation, the better. We have heard feedback by people who are members of multiple groups that this is one of the better ones, if not the best one out there, that is of libertarians and Christians. So we kind of wear that proudly. What kind of brings to mind, the idea that we're on Facebook and, we like to debate and do things. I have learned over the past, probably through the last election cycle, even more importantly, because I have real friends out there in the world who don't share my theology or my politics. I have learned to pick and choose my battles wisely, to pick and choose what I hit share on. Will I sort of ostracize or make enemies with people that I have to go to work with simply because I'm posting something that's incredibly unpopular but actually well thought out and rational, rather than the meme that isn't? I've learned over the past, I don't know, maybe decade, but even, like I said, even more so in the most recent election, that, it's important to pick our battles wisely. So I think I want to just bring it up. How do you rank issues? I mean, some things are more important to me than others. I will almost freely post things about immigration and accepting refugees. I stay away from other issues because they sometimes can be just too much to get into. And some of it just has to do with the amount of time that I want to invest. I can very easily kind of go to the defense of why I posted an article about immigration and open borders or accepting refugees. But other issues I'm just not as well versed on, even if I have an opinion on it. So Norman, Nick, what do you think about, ranking issues that are important? How do we pick our battles? How do we exit gracefully when we're done with the conversation?
Many years ago, when I first became a Christian, and I was heavily into ultra-apologetic mode, so it was like I had to debate every atheist and every skeptic and everyone who disagreed with me on anything. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. But, I mean, that was a good 10 plus years ago. Over time, I realized that wasn't fruitful to engage in every debate, engage in every discussion. When I think about what battles to pick, particularly as it pertains to liberty and how we market the message of liberty and really what are kind of non-negotiable issues, the two that I tend to zero in on are central banking and war. And the reason for that is, as I see it, those are the two issues that most drive every other issue of statism, tyranny, and government expansion. So most of our listeners will be familiar with the famous Randolph Bourne quote, "War is the health of the state." What he means by that is that when you always are out fighting, you have an enemy, you're always at war. The tendency of the government in a state of war is to grow, and that means that liberty is going to diminish. And then the flip side of that, central banking, is the economic mechanism which makes it all possible. So if you look back historically, like to the Middle Ages, and particularly the feudal system, before the alliance between the merchants and the kings, if the king wanted to go to war, he had to actually raise the money from the lords to go to war. Central banking, which is really kind of came out of this alliance in the Middle Ages between the merchants and the crown, allows the monarch, or in this case any ruler, the empire, the state, what have you, to monetize and finance their war. So the bank provides the credit, the state goes off to war, and then the nature of that is the state expands and expands and expands, and the people become less free. So those are the two issues that I think are primary. I mean, there's so many issues of ethics and policy and economics that we can talk about that are all relevant, that are all important, but the two that really drive all the others, I think, are war and central banking. And so those are the two that I personally harp on the most.
Nick, it's also interestingly the case that this is the reason why they call things like the war on poverty or the war on drugs wars in the first place, because it kind of gives the illusion of there's this enemy, we got to fight it, and we have to ratchet up the power of the state. By the way, that means we need money, and that enables more justification for the central bank to be able to issue that credit and expand. That is part of that ratcheting of power. So that I think is a really good way of putting it, Nick, because central banking and war are these really chief issues. War is final. People die. Lives don't come back like that. That is, and that's why we harp on that so much. And it's definitely something that I talk about a lot. I want to take a slightly different tactic in answering the question, which is what battles are worth fighting politically. This is an interesting point that libertarians debate all the time. What political battles are really worth fighting? Now, in some respects, we as Christians kind of recognize that is a battlefield that we don't always really want to fight on at all. But there are some battles that you can kind of foresee that you're actually going to make a realistic difference. So I want to relay a little story that a lot of people may have heard about or may have heard, marginally of. But a number of years ago, there was this is back in 2010. There was the growing concern amongst people in the United States at the ratcheting up of power of the TSA. And that was being, we were beginning to see the implementation of enhanced security procedures, as they were calling them, or enhanced, I think they just called it enhanced security, with body scanners and pat downs, and that was a big deal. We were beginning to see that implemented at all the major airports, and it was becoming a concern to people, and we didn't really know what to do about it. Well, I kind of recognized at the time that was a battle that was worth fighting, because we had a few things going for us. We had popular opinion that was kind of ready and willing for an alternative viewpoint. There was a political climate in Texas at the time where we had potential to make some noise, and we had enough support at the ground level that we could make something happen. And so recognizing that, I actually started up what became known as we got a team together and we started writing legislation, and we had David Simpson in Texas introduce legislation that became national news that tried to restrict the power of the TSA to do certain things and have certain powers. And we made a big splash on it. Like I said, it made national news. And we, in many respects, I think we helped influence some of the policy there as a result. And that was very exciting to see. Now, what are the lessons of this? I think that the idea here is really just that when you're ready to picking your battles well politically matters. And it's not just putting somebody up for an election or just holding a random protest. But there are ways in which you can target certain policies where you can influence representatives. You can make a difference in a very small way that has a force multiplier effect. And as a result, you don't need to shoot for the moon. It's not like you're trying to win the presidency. I mean, Ron Paul is a once in a generation sort of event when it comes down to it. But there are things that we can do at local levels in small ways that make a difference and have force multiplier effects on the long run. And you have to kind of look for those carefully. You don't want to just jump into them quickly. You need to kind of really carefully consider the climate and the situation at hand. And I can't just offer you the perfect answer, but I can kind of relay to you the story as to how we came to that decision, which obviously what we just did, and encourage you to look for opportunities like that. Maybe it's on a school board, maybe it's on a in a city council, maybe it's something you can do at a state level. If you look for opportunities, you can sometimes make a difference where you might not necessarily expect. We were very fortunate in what we did against the TSA at that point in time. A lot of people don't know all of the things that went on behind the scenes there, and it would take way too long to tell you everything that happened. But those are sorts of things that you can look out for and make a difference. So that's something to think about with regard to picking battles. So that's our show for today. We hope you enjoyed this roundtable discussion. And if you have some feedback for us, we hope that you'll contact us. You can reach us at podcast@libertarianchristians.com, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, and of course, our website, libertarianchristians.com. And like we said earlier, we hope you'll come and join us at the Christian Libertarian Facebook group as well. We invite your questions, and we hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you next time.
The Libertarian Christian Podcast is a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute, a registered 501c3 nonprofit. The audio engineers were Doug Stewart and Jason Rink, and voiceovers were by Matthew Bellis and Caitlin Horn. If you'd like to find out more about the LCI, please visit us on the web at www.libertarianchristians.com.